till I can't no more.
I got the horses in the bag. Horse stock is a tag.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Protocol 36. Today's video will be about villains that we know exist in the Marvel Spider-Man universe. I'll be talking about villains that we see in the game, villains that are hinted towards or mentioned but haven't showed up yet. I'll also be mentioning villains that we haven't heard about yet and the possibilities if they exist or not, but we'll most likely see them sooner or later. However, you never know. Some of them could show up in Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. Okay, so listing off the villains that we already know who exist and played against. Kingpin being the first villain that we face in the game, who was also Peter's arch nemesis in the 8 years of him being Spider-Man until he was sent to jail. Shaka is also a villain we faced several times in the game. After our second encounter, he was sent to the raft. Mr. Negative, along with his inner demons, who not only tries to get revenge but also tries to fill in the power vacuum left by Wilson Fisk, and later in the game becomes a member of the Sinister Six. Silver Sable, who also appears in the game with her Sable agents hired by Norman Osborn to protect him from the demons, and later Sable and her team became enemies to Spider-Man, however later became allies after Peter told her that he was here to protect Norman and that they should work together rather than fighting each other. She also shows up later in the Silver Lining DLC to get her weapons and tech back from Hammerhead, who stole it sometime before the Turf Wars DLC. Other members of the Sinister Six we also see and Peter had to face in his infancy of his superhero career and well after are Rhino, Scorpion, Electro being the first supervillain with actual superpowers Peter has faced in this universe, Ultra being a recurring villain Peter had to face multiple times before the events of the first game, and no surprise the main villain and the one who founded the team being Dr. Otto Octavius, who we see the origin story of. And even though Doc Ock was one of the oldest foes of Spider-Man in the comics, in the game he's Peter's relatively newest foe and most personal enemy as of so far. Other villains we see in the game are Taskmaster, Tombstone and Screwball, all of whom we see in different side missions of the game. Screwball shows up throughout the entire City That Never Sleeps DLCs, but there isn't too much to talk about here other than the fact that Peter has never faced her before the events of the first game. And moving over to the DLC, we have Black Cat. Even though she's not a villain and more of an ally and a lover to Spider-Man, she has had a few scuffles, and Black Cat does use his heart to trick him, such as how she was talking about her quote-unquote son and later even fakes her own death at the end of the Heist DLC. We also see Hammerhead in the Heist DLC for the first time, setting him up as the main villain of the City That Never Sleeps DLC, causing nothing but trouble for the old webhead and Yura Watanabe, even driving her over the edge by killing a lot of her men who had families, which led to Yuri temporarily killing him until one of his men brought him back. However, the last we see of him is the Silver Lining DLC. He pays the consequences for stealing the tech that belonged to Sable, which led to his defeat by Sable and Spider-Man. Speaking of the Silver Lining DLC, we also have Yura Watanabe kind of becoming more of a comic book alter ego, the Wraith, killing criminals who she felt like deserved it. Even though she's more so an anti-hero, Peter did warn her that he will stop her if she doesn't stop what she's doing, and it's unlikely that she will. Even though those villains haven't showed up in the game, we know they exist because of hints provided by the game or other mediums such as the comic book tie-ins. Those villains being Sandman, who are main mentions in the game and is contained in a small vial by Peter, the Lizard who is cured before the events of the game, and one of the professors in the game who's dressed up as the villain in the ESU Halloween party. I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Connors does come back as the villainous reptile in the sequel. Mysterio is also a villain who mentioned multiple times in the game. He also showed up in the canon comic as Quentin Beck, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does show up in the sequel one form or another. We also know that Chameleon exists because Peter name drops him when he speculates who the fake Spider-Man is. We also get a mention of Miles' uncle, who's arguably at this point the most popular version of the Prowler and will most likely show up in Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is coming out later this year along with the PlayStation 5. However, there's no hint on the existence of Hobie Brown, who's the first version of the Prowler. In one of the construction sites, we can hear one of the Kingpin's goons mention Silvermane, who's a notable crime boss in the Spider-Man mythos and the father of Silver Sable. One character I don't hear people talk about enough is the Dr. Morgan Michaels. The reason why I mention him is because he could actually be Morbius the Living Vampire. And the reason why I say this is because of the fact that Dr. Morgan Michaels was one of the aliases of Michael Morbius in the comics, which may have been intentional on Insomniac's part, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do see him becoming Morbius in a future game. However, the only thing defeating the theory is the fact that comic Morbius is from Greece while in the game he looks to be African American. But they may have changed the ethnicity to throw players off, but who knows. We also have the villain Swarm in this universe, who not only gets a name drop by J. Jonah Jameson in the game, but also shows up in the comics too, facing Spider-Man. For those of you who don't know who Swarm is, he's basically a Spider-Man villain who controls bees and uses them to compose a body for himself. Yeah, it's a bit weird, trust me. I also forgot to mention Professor Miles Warren, who is basically in the comics the Jackal who was responsible for the Clone Saga, and also was a professor at Peter's University when he was a student, both in the game and the comics. As we can see in one of the backpacks, he marked one of Peter's papers, which later got him the job over at Octavius Industries. Tarantula is also a villain who shows up in the comics in Spider-Geddon issue 0, where Superior Spider-Man tries to recruit Insomniac Spider-Man for the upcoming conflict against the Inheritors. We see them go up against PS4's version of Tarantula, confirming his existence in this universe. Even though this next villain didn't get a mention in the game, we do know he exists, as the Marvel Spider-Man Hostile Takeover confirms his existence. That villain being Blood Spider, who was hired by Kingpin to pretend being Spider-Man in order to ruin his reputation, but later defeated by the Webhead, of course. I know a lot of you at this point are wondering about the Green Goblin, since we have Norman Osborn, who plays a huge role in the game. When you enter the penthouse of Norman Osborn as Mary Jane, where you see the helmet and also the glider and the prototype pumpkin bombs. Clearly Insomniac is setting him up to be a massive villain in the future. Another hint of one of Peter's biggest villains are Venom. We do have a mention of Eddie Brock in the form of the backpacks, signing a good luck card to Peter, as I've talked about multiple times in my videos. However, whether he will be Venom is unknown right now because of the fact that Harry has the symbiote. So we have two of Peter's biggest enemies that do exist and hinted to become villains in the future. For Norman, we don't know when he will become the Green Goblin, and for Venom, we don't even know, assuming Insomniac will go to a different route for the character. Next, we have villains. We don't know whether they exist or may show up one day in the franchise sooner or later. One of them being Kraven the Hunter. In the game, we pretty much have zero references of Kraven, which isn't a bad thing, of course, but it does beg the question whether Peter even faced a version of Kraven, or if Sergei Kravinoff did even become Kraven at some point, or are they possibly saving him for the Miles Morales game? I doubt it. However, it would be interesting to see him go up against Miles before he goes up against Peter, to see if he's ready to go up against the older version of Spider-Man. I do hope he shows up in the sequel. I think his fights would be phenomenal to play against and see. Beetle is also a character I would love to see in the future, but I haven't had him mentioned yet. But if I had to make a bet, I wouldn't be surprised if Tombstone has a daughter and she becomes this universe's version of Beetle, because that's what happened in the comics. And I wouldn't mind, however, there's no hint of Tombstone having a daughter, but it doesn't mean it can never happen. We also have no mention of the Hobgoblin or any type of goblins except for Green, of course. We can't really have any type of goblins before the Green Goblin, unless you're the 90s animated Spider-Man series, of course, where they actually did that. But I think Insomniac will want to do the Green Goblin first before they think about doing the Hobgoblin. But there's no references towards. Also, no references towards Carnage, aka Cletus Cassidy. Makes sense because for the Carnage symbiote to be a thing, you need a Venom symbiote, which is currently with Harry. I do think after they introduce Venom, then we will get the Carnage symbiote, whether in a side mission or overall villain of a DLC pack, which would be worth it in my opinion. Also, Man-Wolf, who's John Jameson. Even though we have J. Jonah Jameson in the game, we have no mention of his son, as far as I know. Though I still think he exists in this universe, but it's unknown whether he will be a villain or not in the future. But it would be cool to see him in a side mission, and his father in the flesh this time. Another villain we have no mention of is Hydra Man, who's made out of water, able to manipulate water similar to how Sandman is able to manipulate sand. I think it would be interesting and better suited if you put him in the Miles Morales game. Whether he's going to be in it or not, we don't know, but one can speculate. Or they could even do what the 90s animated Spider-Man series did, where Morris Bench was an obsessed ex-boyfriend of Mary Jane. And the DLC did say that while Peter and her split up, she did meet other people. One of them could be Morris Bench, but it depends on Insomniac whether if they want to go to that route or not. Morton Man is also a villain we have no mention or hint of. He's the stepbrother of Liz Allen, who was Peter's high school crush. However, we have no mention of him or even Liz Allen in the game. He's not really a massive villain, which is probably why they didn't really think about him that much, because why would they? The Spot is also a villain we have no mention of and never appears, and I think a character like him would provide really fun and great side missions if done properly for either Miles or Peter. Whether he will show up or not is unlikely, but we may never know until then. We also have no mention of the Enforcers, who are old foes of Spider-Man in the comics. 3 bosses against Spider-Man would be awesome and challenging to see. Other minor villains who are less likely to show up are Jester, who worked with Screwball in the Superior Spider-Man comics, but due to the backlash of Screwball in the game and in the DLCs, I doubt he will show up anytime soon. Others being Kangaroo, Cyclone, Jonas Harrow, Grizzly, Gibbon, Sin Eater, Big Man, Cardiac, Bloodshed, Foreigner, Calypso, who's associated with Kraven the Hunter, and in some interpretations his lover/wife, and many more villains. There are hundreds upon hundreds of Spider-Man villains, which Insomniac of course don't have all the energy to consider because there are simply too many of them, but I wouldn't be surprised if many of the villains I just listed off don't show up in future games, other than the big ones of course, like Kraven the Hunter, Hobgoblin, Carnage, possibly even Hydra Man, who knows. However, what about you guys? Did you think I missed any villains who may exist in the Marvel Spider-Man universe? Which villains do you want to show up in future games? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and make sure to subscribe if you're new to begin Protocol 36.